themes of racist zoning policies and land redistribution have disproportionately affected people of color. Certain communities, such as Piedmont, have benefited from decades of racial covenants and exclusionary policies that have allowed institutionalized racism to persist and become further ingrained within our zoning and housing policies. In Oakland, which surrounds Piedmont, policies such as redlining and eminent domain have destroyed communities and increased segregation across differently redlined zones. If we do not correct these ingrained systems of property and wealth hoarding and segregation of minority populations, the system will only persist and continue to drive down community health for the entire population. Through our research into public housing and restorative justice practices, we identified strong links between mass incarceration, poverty, institutionalized racism, and a lack of available housing combined with a lack of supportive services. Our current incarceration system, which we have termed as that of retributive justice, is designed to keep those who have entered the system within the system. While effective, we can definitively determine that this system of mass incarceration is one of the biggest contributors to the cycle of poverty and disadvantage. Poverty, when seen from a pure economic standpoint, affects not only those in its throes, but everyone in the community. Affordable housing is more than a need and more than a right. It is something essential to the function of our cities and of our country. Public housing is a word that denotes many connotations in the American mind. We think of Pruitt-Igoe in St. Louis, Jordan Downs in Watts, and Hunter's View in San Francisco. What we do not realize is that poor policy, poor planning, and lack of community involvement have led to the failures of the past, not the idea of publicly funded housing itself. These past projects also failed to provide key services aimed towards not only housing at-risk individuals, but providing them with skills and support to create long-term success. Supportive housing is a housing type that is both affordable and contains support spaces that serve the needs of the community within. Our project seeks to provide restorative services to individuals and families affected by mass incarceration through the creation of a system that provides both housing and supportive services that create long-term success amongst individuals who have previously suffered at the hands of an unjust system. Blair Park is a site in Piedmont which is owned by the Piedmont City Council. This area has been identified as a potential site for affordable multifamily housing by the Piedmont Racial Equity Campaign. Because Blair Park is owned by Piedmont, we have settled on the public-private partnership as our property strategy. PPPs, or public-private partnerships, are relationships between government and private industry. These relationships are used to share cost and benefits in projects. These partnerships can take multiple forms, which involve different transfers of ownership and financial responsibility between the private and public partners. CBP3s were initially started as a strategy to increase success and involvement in the development of green infrastructure projects. CBP3s include a community advisory board in their power dynamic. This allows for increased success of all three bodies that are invested in a project. The Piedmont City Council owns Blair Park. Using the community-based public-private partnership model, the city can develop the land through transfer of ownership under contract to private land developers. Prior to this transfer, Piedmont can place a deed restriction on the land, permitting housing development only under the circumstances that the housing be supportive and affordable. The private land developers then build, own, and operate the land, both private and public being monitored and directed by the community board aspect. This community factor includes an advisory board that guides the other entities. Through the addition of community into the P3 model, the residents of Piedmont can provide intimate guidance and information that will determine the overall success. Private industry has the ability to both benefit from supportive and affordable housing grants as well as the income from commercial spaces which tie together the residential areas. These commercial spaces become the support within the supportive housing dynamic. We have decided to include industries which are geared towards reentry services of those who have been previously incarcerated, as well as industries that provide both life and home skills training, such as childcare and cooking classes. By developing Blair Park using a partnership between the City of Piedmont, a network of private industries geared toward restorative services, and a community-based advisory board, this underutilized lot can become an incubation zone of rehabilitation that improves community health for all of Oakland and reduces the isolation of the community of Piedmont. In order to create the framework for this system of housing and support, we wanted to develop a system that allowed for designated housing sites which were dynamic in their placement, allowing for pockets of more public or more private zones of interaction to be generated. These zones of interaction create spaces which incubate new community members, as well as areas that members of the greater Piedmont community can utilize to engage with the new community. Our chosen elements, fixtures, and walls both influence and contain one another. We have defined fixtures as services which provide an essential service and are permanent within a structure. Our initial formal move along the site was to create a system of rotating triangles. This was done to assist in the navigation of a long and narrow site, in addition to tying in the original structure of accountability defined by a property strategy with three essential bodies: public, private, and community. By understanding fixtures and walls as elements that can both contain and influence one another, we first placed a series of retaining walls within the scope of each individual triangle. These fixed walls both create stable zones for permanent private residences, as well as help to navigate the slope of the site. Following the development of this initial system of retaining wall units, a second system is developed through the extension of fixtures beyond these initial walls. This second system provides support spaces such as private meeting rooms, daycares, toy libraries, and communal gardens and washing spaces, as well as allowing for the creation of commercial zones that can be utilized by the private industry. On the ground floor, community interaction is encouraged and supported. Spaces vary in degrees of privacy based on their proximity to the adjacent Moraga Avenue, in addition to their location within the site. Here we see a family that has made the entire second floor of one housing typology their home. By creating multiple typologies with versatile and varying housing options, a broader solution can provide assistance to more residents. The zones of interaction and public spaces include production areas as well as services to teach and strengthen skills, such as manufacturing areas, learning spaces, and zones for personal development and enrichment. There are two typology for housing units, to allow for more diverse living scenarios, as well as allowing for flexibility of choice among residents, as well as to increase the diversity of populations living here. These two typologies are mixed along the site, with 4-bedroom units clustered together to allow for more degrees of privacy and community interaction. By creating typologies for housing, a dynamic group of individuals can begin to utilize this system. Service areas become shared, allowing for a communal environment to exist.